Okay. My name is Peter Ruggenthaler. I'm the Deputy Director of the Boltzmann Institute for Research on War Consequences, which is based in the city of Graz in Austria. I'm also heading the program line of Cold War Studies here at the Institute. So my main research focus is on diplomatic relations, diplomatic history, mostly on Soviet foreign policy. I was asked to first encourage you to go to Moscow archives, to work at Moscow archives, and to give you a brief overview on the possibilities to work, especially in the Russian state archives on contemporary history, the so-called Ergani. When I went first to Russian archives, it was in 1998, I went to the archives of the Ministry of Defense in Podolsk near Moscow, the so-called Samo. The situation was quite strange. I was asked to work in a separate room alone. I got some files, very interesting files on the Red Army, on the Soviet occupation of Austria, 1945, 1955. Next to me, sitting lady from the archives, always watching me, what I'm reading, what I'm writing out, just controlling me. No chance to get any copies. The situation changed dramatically. Also in this archives, it's still hard to work at this archives. I won't talk about this archives now, but it is nothing compared to the situation of work at Ergani, where you can just go to the reading room, order files, work on them, make copies, and so the chances nowadays are really, the opportunities nowadays are just great. A research trip to Moscow. It is not always a question of bureaucracy. If you don't get needed materials, it is of course also a question of knowledge of the archives. It is a long process, especially if you're working on a PhD, for example. You can never be sure to find concretely what you are expecting, but on the other hand, you maybe find things you will not expect. I give you just one example. In my first years of my academic career, I was working on Soviet policy towards Austria and Germany. Not only by chance, but not only by luck, I had a possibility to work at another archives in Ergaspi, where I suddenly found documents on the German division. Actually, these are documents almost everyone was looking for. I then published a book on that 15 years ago. It's called Stalin Großer Bluff. I had the chance to first publish these papers, mainly out of the Molotov's collection and Politburo. Politburo, you just have to imagine, you cannot go to the archives and say, for example, I mean, many people did it on this, I'd like to get all the papers on the question of the division of Germany. Even if you use the finding aids of the Politburo, and this is in the case of Ergani font 3, collection number 3, in the finding aids, you just will find the years and bureaucratic system, how the papers are stored in this collection. So you really have to go just through all the files, order them one by another, to go through all the sessions of the Politburo, and if you know when something happened, you can, of course, shorten the period, but nevertheless, just if you start working on a PhD, for example, take the years 1970 to 1975, just begin to order all the Politburo materials they have from the beginning. And then you, of course, will need a lot of time to go through all of them, but only this way you can ensure that you, first of all, saw and went through all the declassified documents, and only this way it works how you will find your things. So I mentioned already this, main, I would say the most important collection of the Russian State Archives of Contemporary History is, of course, the holdings of the Politburo. This is first of all the decisions of the Politburo, which are stored in several sub files, OPC in Russian. Easy to handle. Let me give you one example. This, for example, is a collection of documents of a few hundred documents, mainly out of the Russian State Archives on Contemporary History on the crackdown of the Prague Spring. So you don't go to the archives, of course, and ask the archivists to give you all you have on the Prague Spring. In the case of the Politburo decisions, here it is a very short period, 1966, 7 to 1968, 69. We just scanned all the Politburo decisions, went through all of them, took out all declassified decisions, and had the opportunity to publish them together with the Russian colleagues in this volume in Russian original and in translation into German. So this is just an example how to handle the Politburo decisions. Another important collection of Ergani is, of course, Font 1. This contains the party congresses of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which is just huge materials. But the good thing is that you do have, in the United States, you do have copies of all these documents at several institutions, like in the libraries of Harvard University. So, for example, even for me as an Austrian, it is easier to go to America to work in the archives there for 2 weeks or so than to go to Moscow, although Moscow is, of course, much nearer than America, just 2 hours to fly to Moscow. But the opportunities to work on these collections are much better in America, of course, because you don't have any restrictions. You can take microfilms to go through them. You can order, just take them out of the reader's room. If you go to the archives in Moscow, you'll just get a few files on every day to go through them. So whatever you're working on, I would strongly recommend you to first go through these collections at your universities, wherever they are stored at several locations, as far as I know. This is, as I mentioned, all the materials of the party congresses of the Soviet Union for the period of 1952 to 1990, 1991. This, as I mentioned, is collection number 1, Font Adin, first collection. The second one as well. These are the materials of the plenary sessions of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Also very rich collections. Also, whatever you're working on, just really have to go through all these papers. You can find interesting things on in files where you don't expect it, for example. So it makes absolutely sense to go through all of them. This is the so-called a second collection. In total, Ergani stores 69 collections. Out of these 69 collections, only a few have been microfilmed in the early 90s, and that's the way how they came to American archives and universities. So this does not mean that you can do all the archival research at your institutions in the US, but you definitely have to go to Moscow and to work at the Russian State Archives on contemporary history. Besides these 69 collections, I'll talk on some other collections afterwards. Ergani stores also a few thousands of microfilm collections which you are able to use in the reader's room. Ergani just moved from the old place at the old square in Moscow to Sofiyskaya Naberezhnya, so just opposite of the Kremlin at the Moscow River, into a new building where they have excellent opportunities to work at. The reader's room is just modern, it's easy to handle. So it's now more or less really a normal archive you can go to and just work. Ergani, of course, also contains the collections of the various departments of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, beginning with the fifth collection, Fund 5. Within this fund, you can discover all the various departments. If you're dealing with diplomatic relations, for example, as I do, the most important department is the international department of the Central Committee. This collection is quite easy to handle since you can go through the files by countries and by years. So you can just go there and order, for example, the files on the United States for the year, let's say, 1961. Within this collection of the Fund 5, you can find, of course, documents out of all ministries of the Soviet Union. You can find there KGB reports, you'll find there documents of the Soviet Foreign Ministry and all the others. So whatever came into the Central Committee, you will find within the collections of the various departments. So the advantage is, of course, that you somewhere in all these collections, you will definitely find whatever you are looking for. The difficult thing is that you can never know where you will find them. Also, the finding aids are not of great use for this. So to say and to point out once more, it is, of course, a huge work. It is a very interesting work. You'll find things which you won't expect that you will find them. So I just once more can point out, just use the chance if you have the chance to go to Moscow and to work at the archives there, especially at Ergani, where working conditions are just excellent. Ergani also contains, of course, the personal collections of the party leaders of the Soviet Union, and not only of the party leaders, but declassified are already the holdings of Nikita Khrushchev. We have published a lot of them on Germany, on Europe in German, in various collections of documents. It is a huge and rich collection, very useful, with the number 52. But also now for the last years, Brezhnev's collection has been made accessible, at least so far until the year of 1975. We have just finished a project on the so-called Ostpolitik, on West German Soviet relations. Just came out a few weeks ago. This is a collection of essays on international diplomacy, diplomatic relations, on détente and so on. The key documents we have put on a website, the Russian originals, the facsimile. You can go on postpolitik.de for Germany, DE, and can just read them in Russian and in German translation. You'll get the feeling, whatever you're working on, which documents you can find in Brezhnev's personal collection. There are also documents out of other departments of the Central Committee, but I would very much recommend you to go on this homepage and to see what kind of documents you will find at Ergani. In total, the basis of sources at Russian State Archives on Contemporary History are quite good for the years after 1942 until 1975. There is still a lack of documents, especially of the party leaders for the years of 1975 until 1982, until Andropov and Chernenko. Andropov's personal collection is available at Ergani, but also for the Gorbachev period, there's still a huge lack, since you just have to imagine that not all documents and all collections automatically have been stored at the Russian State Archives of Contemporary History, but first at the archives of the president. So some collections are still there. It is named Archives of the President, but it is more or less not an archive, since it is almost inaccessible for foreigners. It is absolutely inaccessible, and it contains mainly collections which are still declassified. But whenever collections are being declassified, they are handed over to the Russian State Archives on Contemporary History at Ergani, where you can then use them in the reader's room. Why from 1952? I think you also listened to the talk of Vladislav Zubok, who is talking about Ergaspi, so the other party archives where the collections are stored until 1952. So after Stalin renamed the Bolshevist Party into Communist Party of the Soviet Union, all these, so the archives of the Communist Party are officially stored at Ergani. Until 1991, for example, we also did a project on the end of the Cold War, Moscow's perception of the changes in Eastern Europe. We published 2 volumes in German and in English, Der Kreml und die Wende, 1989, or in Russian, Koniec Epoche, the end of an epoch, the USSR and the revolutions in the countries of Eastern Europe, 1989 until 1991. So you find them in German translation and then Russian here in this volume. Also like to encourage you, just order the box at your libraries, and before you go first to Moscow archives, especially to Ergani, just go through the published documents. It's in total for, so to say, for 20 years. It's not so much. It is already much. We used to a situation that we had almost zero when the Cold War studies more or less began after the end of the Cold War. but since then, quite huge work has been done. But once more, whatever you're working on, just go through the published documents, which are enormously also available in the internet already, just to get, first of all, the feeling which kind of documents you're gonna find in Moscow archives, and it will help you just organizing your research trip and your own work at the archives. The Russian State Archives on Contemporary History does have also now a very good homepage where you can just easily learn how to work at the archives, what you have to do and what you have to prepare before you go there, because I just have to warn you, you cannot go just to Moscow and go to the archives and say, I'm here, I'd like to work now. You have to prepare some papers, so whatever is needed you'll find on the homepage. It is ergani.rf for Russian Federation. You can see also an overview of the collections they have at the archives. You can find publications of the archives. The archives itself is quite open-minded. It is an accessible archives. They do have, of course, their rules, as any archives in the world does have, but Ergani is definitely one of the archives in Russia which is quite good, accessible. The classification is quite good. So, as I told you at the beginning, I was quite depressed after my first research stay in Moscow, since I just was thinking, how will I ever find materials which are related to my work, which I need. It was, and it can be sometimes really frustrating, but anyway, I'd like to give you the hope. Just if you go, for example, on our homepage and see the projects where I was working on for the almost more than last 20 years ago. It's just an example, not only me, many other people do so as well, that it is not only a question of hope, it is of course a question of work, of time, of course, since you're young graduate students or PhDs, just use your times for research stays in Moscow. You will then, by the time, win and get more knowledge to find what you're looking for. I cannot promise you that you will find everything you are expecting or looking for. I just can give you a few examples of my own experience. I was talking about the book on the German division, or concretely on the deepening of the German division in 1952, the so-called Stalin Note and all this debate. This was the crucial question in German historiography for many decades. On Soviet policy, what could one say? Almost nothing without original documents. You couldn't see behind the scenes at the Kremlin. So many German scholars and others did so in the early 90s and tried to find the materials which would solve this question, which would give an answer on the motives of Stalin and Molotov. How was their real attitude regarding the division of Germany and so on. In the early 90s, many people did so, didn't find anything. Now I can easily explain why. First of all, relevant materials on the story are not to be found at the Soviet Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You may know Molotov was dismissed in 1949 by Stalin. Stalin's personal papers are, first of all, very limited. Mostly you will find on such questions only the the final versions of the documents, very few comments by Stalin himself. So it is quite difficult to recognize or to recover the story, which is possible since Stalin was, of course, in contact with all his ministers, advisors, Politburo, and so on. And so this is the way how you can see Stalin's directions, decisions, and so on. So what to say? All the important materials on the Stalin note were to be found in Molotov's collections, which were, first of all, not really accessible in the 90s. Some scholars, Russian scholars, did have an opportunity to go through them at the so-called archives of the president. They were obviously looking for other things, but not working on Germany at the time. So since I was working on Austria some 15 years ago, I found out that it was anyway Molotov who played the most important role in the decision-making of foreign policy towards Austria, also after 1949, which was quite crucial for the understanding of the decision-making of Soviet policy toward Austria. So I already then found some hints also connected. I mean, you never can divide Austria and Germany from the Soviet perspective, since this is all the same for the Soviets. Austrians are Germans for them. The solution of the Austrian question was always in connection with the all German question. So I could expect already at that time that the documents on the Stalin debate will be probably somewhere hopefully can be found in Molotov's collection. And this was the case. So with this knowledge, I could very concretely search for these documents then this is not Ergani, it is the other archives, Ergaspi. And so it was on me to publish these documents and to encourage the old debate on the question of the division of Germany, yeah, already 15 years ago. Since then, I've published a lot on these topics, also in English. A monograph came out some 2015 at Harvard Cold War Studies book series on these questions on the division of Europe and so on. It is called The Concept of Neutrality in Stalin's Foreign Policy, and it handles all these questions. So when I went to Moscow, I couldn't expect that I will that I will have the possibility to look behind the scenes and to find these materials. Actually, many people are working on such things and hoping and doing this. So with this little story, I'd just like to encourage you that you'll never know. It makes sense to spend most of the time in the archives. Literature, of course, this is the first step, but anyway, just go to the archives and read and read and read and read. Even if these are files where you don't expect any findings, just read them. You'll never know what comes across the table. Maybe you even discover other stories for you, which are of interest for you, which you can handle in the future, or even change main topics of you're working on. So with one word, once more, if you have the possibility to go there whenever the crisis is over and one can travel again, go to the archives, and try whatever is possible for you, and I'm sure you'll then succeed.